All right, we are live on the Extraordinary Sports YouTube channel and podcast with a very special guest, Mike Vaccaro, lead journalist of the New York Post. The man is a very pristine writer. He's got over 50 awards in his career. Mike, thank you so much for joining me. Excited to be on the mic with you.
Oh, it's really great to be with you.
So I'll just jump right into it. I thought your article just a few days ago about the NBA superstars and the issue with them sitting when it's not convenient for the league to sit was very refreshing and very unique. I want to jump right into it. Question of in regards to how you came up with the theory. Did you kind of observe the ongoing issue the last several weeks, months, even now, I guess, over a season, and then kind of come to your own conclusion? How did the theory initially kick off for you?
You know what's funny, Alex, is that I was like anybody else who's a basketball fan. It troubled me at the very beginning when Popovich did it. But I think it really started to become something that was bothersome to me as other teams picked it up, as it became not just a semi-regular thing,
right?
But just the nonchalance with which it seems that teams approach this. And I think that's what offends me as much as anything. I mean, the notion that I think a lot of these guys I don't think they believe it. Like I think Popovich and Kerr, these guys are too smart to believe that this isn't a problem, and then they see things in too big picture of prism to not understand that this is an issue. Really be a problem for the league until it's fixed. And so, I think you sit around and you watch this, and look, I mean, I go to a lot of games, and I hate to go to a lot of games, but I enjoy watching games too. I'm a fan of everybody as much as I am a sports writer. So, I mean, as a basketball fan, it just really bothers me. In principle, I understand it, but in practice, it just looks terrible. And the reality is, it just decimates the product. When you have back-to-back Saturday nights that have just been ruined. I'm a guy that even if I'm out, at a dinner party, I mean, if there's a great NBA game on TV, I'll try and find a TV to find 5 minutes to steal 5 minutes.
Oh yeah.
But why would you do that for those two games in question? Anyway, so that's all the lead up to it, and it's funny. And I hadn't written about it. The part of it is I think that around here in New York, we wouldn't mind seeing the Knicks and the Nets take permanent breaks. So we kind of around here, I think most of the NBA, but. It was after the last, the second of the back-to-back Saturdays. And it was funny, I was just talking to my editor, and he's like, let's tell them about this. And I'm like, yeah, it's a good idea. It's something that really bothers me. But, I didn't just want to say, well, this stinks, because of course it does. And it was funny because we had just been talking like 5 seconds before about baseball's disabled list and how, it's a good idea, but it should be tweaked to a 7-day list. And I said to my editor, I said, why don't we do it like backwards to try and figure out if we could figure out a solution or a proposed solution to the basketball thing. I think a lot of people think the baseball DL, it causes its own issues because 15 days is the shortest available stay. So if you got a short, you're probably not going to go on it, or you're going to struggle whether you want to send somebody on it because you don't want to lose them for 2 weeks. Well, if you apply the notion of the DL to, if you have a couple of starters out, and it's clear that it's being done with the idea of resting them and not because they're hurt, why not make it forceful? And if you're going to sit these 2 guys or 3 guys or 5 guys for 1 game, you're going to have to sit them for 3. I think that would be a deterrent. Now, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that has to go on. Obviously, both sides of the labor issue have to think it's as good a day as I do. I say that that's necessarily the way to do it, but I think something like that, something with its real repercussion, is the only way that coaches are going to be moved off this. Because really, there's no reason, especially if you have confidence in your team and your team is accomplished. The Cavaliers to fear finishing 4th in the conference. Once the playoffs start, they can beat anybody anywhere. Mm-hmm. So what's the benefit of not players?
It's an interesting take, and just to kind of reiterate again your theory. So just pulling an exact quote, basically you're acting in essence a miniature disabled list similar to the one baseball uses. So if a team chooses to rest one player, allowable, even if that player happens to be an ace drawing James or Curry, etc., they got to now sit out 3 games. They go with one or more superstar. I find that to be pretty interesting. And obviously we like – yeah.
Here's the thing. I think what that does, Alex, is I'm acknowledging the fact that in the modern game, in the modern era, that it's probably, something to be thought about where you do need rest from time to time. I get sitting with LeBron James, but I don't think it's necessarily spitting in the face of the fan if you just sit on games, once every couple of months. I do think it's a real problem, and there's really kind of some malice of forethought if you're talking about sitting LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love when there's nothing wrong with any of them. I think that sends a terrible message. And I mean, you can, just point to any of the best teams in the league and say to yourself, well, when there are certain groupings that all sit together, you realize it's that's so to me, I mean, I think if you're forced to sit those guys for 3 games now as opposed to just one, you're probably going to think twice about whether you do it.
Without question. What do you think someone like Steve Kerr, who played in the 90s and played with very tough, gritted guys that day in, day out, game out, a Rodman, a Pippen, a Jordan, guys like that would rarely take a night off, same with a Reggie Miller, so to speak. Do you think this is, in his own personal opinion, something that's kind of blasphemous, if you will, because of the money that they're making? Or do you also understand, I guess, the science, so to speak, to it that we're hearing from a lot of media outlets that is kind of defending these guys?
Well, look, I mean, I think one of the things you got to think about is, one of the ways that you become a coach who's now won 60 games your first 3 years, trying it, is that your players are willing to go through balls for you. And so we've seen other examples, far more noble examples, of where Kerr understands that as well as anybody, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're talking about the stuff he said after the election and other stuff about other social issues. I mean, clearly Steve Kerr, just to cite one example, is a guy who knows what matters to his players, what his players find important, and he understands that that he will be rewarded with a team that plays hard, whenever they're together on the court. And I think that this is an issue. I mean, while I think they're probably getting a lot up front of the brushback now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, clearly they wouldn't do it if they weren't, if they couldn't sense that the players had an issue, And we haven't yet seen the players rise up and say we're outraged that we're being forced to sit. So I think I think as much as anything, I think it's the smart coaches that are understanding that a way to keep their players happy is to keep them fresh, and not only that, take the pause for keeping them fresh. So,
right.
And I think Curry's obviously a guy who has little problem doing that. He's also the one guy I see who's actually proposed something that's completely unselfish. I mean, he talked about a shorter schedule and then he'd give back some money. Now, whether he would or he wouldn't, again, I think his players don't only notice that, but the fans notice that. He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
Popovich is a smart guy. Tyronn Lue is a smart guy. These guys wouldn't be able to be as successful as they are without being smart. So I think that's I think they all understand that the start position of the NBA coach by being able to get your players to do things you want them to do, and I think that's entirely what this is about in my way. But I mean, and also they believe that it does benefit them. I mean, I don't think they just do it for the sake of doing it. I think they really believe that this is a thing that helps their players fresh for the time when they really didn't play. But there's got to be a way to have everything work. There really does. There's got to be a way to be able to fresh, but also respect the fact that fans want to see them play when they're healthy enough to play.
There's got to be a solution to some degree. And you wouldn't argue, well, okay, they're guys like LeBron, someone that's carrying the league, so to speak, or has been a superstar for a decade and is playing into June since 2011, that he, I don't know, would you put him in his own category, or this is something that, treat every employee, so to speak, with the same treatment? So we're not favoring people, because obviously you got guys like Harden and Westbrook that pride themselves on night in, night out, and aren't in their early 30s already, and having to play a little stretchy with their body and how to make it to June.
Right. Well, the thing that I propose is that to me, anybody who plays at least 24 minutes a game is considered of the group that you can't list more than that person without a physical excuse,
right?
Without medical clearance. And again, that's something of an arbitrary number, but there's 2 quarters a game that tells me that they're a regular player. I mean, it's not it's not that you're doing this with the 12th man. You wouldn't do it with the 12th man, obviously. So, and I think that what I would also do is exempt rookies from the rule, because I think there is a value to letting rookies totally adjust themselves to the wall they all face in their first year in the league. So, there are certainly different tweaks that you can do, and I think it's all designed to get to the same end, which is to strike a balance between what the players and the coaches feel they need to be at their best whenever they're on the floor, and also to not cheat the people who are paying their salaries.
Without question. And I like your theory, because part of why I love baseball is the strategy. There's a lot of games within the game, so to speak. With this, I think it implements certainly a little bit of strategy. I do find it interesting. Is this something that, if you were a Pop or a Kerr, that you would need to notify the league 24 hours in advance, game day of, with I'm going into this game tonight that's syndicated on TNT, and we're benching Kyrie tonight, so I got to let you know in advance? Or is this something day of, just like you're filling out as a manager?
To me, I don't see why it couldn't be day of. How about 2 o'clock? 2 o'clock the day of the game. 2 o'clock local time, day of the game. That gives, for one thing, that gives people who are going to come to the game plenty of time to change the plan, or dump their tickets if they want to. But from a competitive standpoint, it also kind of says it could kind of add a layer of transparency to everything also. And it's it's like I said, like take where the Warriors are now. They might find themselves, especially after Glova, or a big win last night, they might say to themselves, you know what, I think we're fine no matter what. Maybe we'll take 3 of these games in the last 2 weeks of the season and use it as our rest period.
Mm-hmm.
Then you do that, and there's limited blowback. But it's a very delicate balance you got to strike, obviously, because you really can't. Here's the thing. I do think that there's an element now that is shouting too loud about this. The notion. I know now people are attacking LeBron's. Some people are attacking LeBron's manhood because Michael Jordan never took a day off. I'm not sure if that's true. One of the narratives that's probably arisen, but it has arisen in the last couple of years because of the times you see them pretty close. And I find that funny because it's been a tradition in baseball for 125 years that a guy gets a day off every now and again.
Exactly.
This is baseball. I love baseball. But I'm going to compare the two when it comes to a physical toll that the games take on you.
Yeah.
If you need a break in baseball, I think even the greatest athlete in the world probably benefits from the day off here and there in basketball. So, like I said, I think that the way that I was thinking about this, it respects the fact that the best players, Harden, Westbrook, these guys, they could all stand a day off every now and again, once every couple of months. The notion of playing games, I think it's taking their ability if it's not going to serve you in the long purpose. So, as individually days off, I have little problem with, but it's these massive sit-ins, if you will, that really I think are the problem, because those are the ones that seem to come attached with the kind of message the NBA wouldn't want.
Definitely. I want to I had a theory myself, especially after reading your article. It got me inspired. And this might be empowering the players too much. We obviously know it's a players' league as opposed to the NFL, which is all about the shield. If Adam Silver were to say, okay, let's hypothetically 3 to 7 times a year, we're going to give a player the option of not playing and then letting the league know a day or two in advance so that they can change a nationally televised game to a local one. If, let's say, a big 3 in Cleveland is sitting out, if a player were to have that power, do you think that could get dangerous real quick? Or do you think that could be somewhat of a happy medium in regards to making sure the player is heard and empowered, and also not too many times a year, like you alluded to, you're okay with a night off here and there, but it's the player's choice. And I called it the player's card, but again, that could be a slippery slope. I just thought it was an interesting talking point.
No, I do too. You're right. I think what it is look. It's definitely a great step from where we are now. I think that allowing that alone would, I think, take some of the things that make some of us uncomfortable away, because it would, again, it's about transparency, it's about acknowledging it, and it's about making sure that there's an appropriate substitute. I think that's what, again, I think we keep going back to those 2 Saturday nights because it was so stark that, what should have been a showcase event two weeks in a row for the NBA instead becomes a joke.
Yeah.
And becomes the wrong kind of talking point. So, absolutely. I mean, I'm not naive enough to think that my plan is easily implemented. I think your plan is one that would have a lot better chance to, at least as a first layer of trying to solve the problem, be more implementable, if that's even a word.
Well, I appreciate that. And then one more theory, Nick Wright, Fox Sports 1, he went on Colin Cowherd's show, and he had an interesting take of, well, if you want those games like, a few weeks ago when the Spurs and Warriors met and no stars played to matter, well, let's say those head-to-head regular season matchups, let's say 3 times they play, will affect the playoff seeding, eat each other in the playoffs. You think something like that would alleviate the issue as well? I found that to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. I mean, the problem is I think that's the thing you wouldn't know until it actually became practice as opposed to theory. But what I love about basketball issues is that you tend to attract a lot of smart people, a lot of smart opinions. Mm-hmm. I love the idea that of debating whether that would work or not, because I think it's a smart idea. I do. I think I don't know if it would work, but I think it's smart enough to where you might want to give it a shot, because it's a little outside the box, a little outside the envelope, and those sometimes are the kind of ideas that work the best. I mean, to me, I would have loved to have had podcast or sports talk radio or even just written an old-timey sports column and whatever, 1954, whatever it was that the guy in Syracuse invented the shot clock.
Oh, yeah.
Think about what a revolution, the notion of for one thing, the arbitrary notion of 24 seconds. I know it wasn't really arbitrary, but it kind of looks arbitrary, right? And right. Just the notion of, shot clock. I mean, think about, and just think about the guts took for the NBA to do that. Why do they do it? Because people were losing interest in the product. People were tired of slowdowns. People were tired of games that ended 50 to 48. Best athletes in the world not being allowed to show their gifts. So think about talk radio and podcasts discussing 24-second shot clock, and think about what an incredible success, what a fundamental success in terms of adding a new rule to an established game that was. So I think we can all draw inspiration from that. 60 years later,
without question. Yeah, it's a very interesting food for thought. So we're, as a professional sports writer, you've been in the game since 89. Correct me if I'm wrong. What is this one of the most, I guess, serious issues in regards to how much money's at stake, how much star power is at stake in regards to the NBA? Is this something that ranks pretty high from your POV?
Definitely. I mean, and you're right, because, if we're just going to go from my time covering the league, which is, around 89 or 90 or so, clearly, I mean, if you go back 7 or 8 years, the league had other issues and problems that it dealt with and rectified with. But, ever since the boom, ever since the real Bird, Magic, Isaiah, Michael Jordan boom, which is kind of what coincides with the start of my career, I think it is, because it's been, I mean, what's been wonderful about watching the league as a basketball fan is seeing just how, the upward curve has been endless. It's been, nothing but good things stacked on each other. Even when Jordan was out of the league for a couple of years, that allowed us team to win 2 championships, which I think is a net gain for the league. And, it allowed the league to kind of reboot itself a little bit for a couple of years.
Yeah.
There really hasn't been a whole lot of net negatives attached to the league, in that time. And so for this to come along as an important issue, I do think it's become the NBA is its popularity is unparalleled now, especially because you talk about the worldwide markets, you talk about what a global sport has become. I mean, it's a phenomenon that you probably could never have projected, even as recently as years ago, that it would become this big.
Yeah.
That said, whenever there's always the worry that sports executives, sports owners, and players are going to outsmart themselves and do what they can to massacre the golden goose, right? And baseball tried to do that with a couple of labor stoppages, and football is experiencing that with too many of their poor ex-players wandering around in a haze because of concussions, and hockey's done it with work stoppages, and basketball has really seemed to avoid a lot of the big pitfalls and pratfalls because I think of smart leadership, first from David Stern, now from Adam Silver. And they've been able to make fun. Basketball has become what baseball used to be. Baseball was always seemingly about 10 or 15 years ahead of the social curve, and basketball has become that way. Whether you're talking about the moving of the All-Star game because of the LGBT issues, whether you're talking about just their continued sensitivity toward race relations and situation with the Clippers ownership, and on and on. So they recognize far sooner than a lot of other leagues do the potential potholes in the road ahead of them, and that's why I think it's pretty clear to me that I think that this is something Adam Silver wants to try and figure out, because he understands that this isn't going to get any better. It's on its own without being addressed. I mean, it's something that needs to be addressed and fixed, and the question is, how do you address it? And how do you fix it without causing too many hard feelings and too much of a hit to your reputation, because the NBA has really been on just an amazing roll, especially when you compare it to other leagues.
Oh, that goes without saying. Absolutely. How much do you think the last generation of athletes, in the NBA, the Jordan era, how much do you think their endorsement of would help move the football with this? Because I always find it curious. I was born in 90, so just my observation, looking at the NBA, looking at the NFL, there's strong opinions from guys like a Reggie Miller who's going on the Dan Patrick show and giving his 2 cents. If guys like that started stepping up and something like what you proposed, do you think that would move it along a lot faster? Because like we said, we all agree the NBA does a fantastic job with hearing their employees and saying, how can we ultimately have a better product? I wonder how much that it's like the older brother, how much would the endorsement of the older brother affect the psychology and decision-making of the younger brother?
I'd like to think that it would help a great deal. And yet, there does seem to be a genuine sensitivity among the current generation when the generation before them gets a little prickly.
Right.
Whether it's Charles Barkley with his, random shots at whoever. Or, I know the Shaq situation a couple of weeks ago, and that's different. I get it. That's different. But there does seem to be a real sensitivity among the young side. I think, but I think it can all be handled if it was done respectfully. And I think most, is he affected by, Shaq wanting to clown around or Barkley just want to be loud. I mean, I think it's an important enough issue where if enough important enough voices say, look, we need to fix this, but I do think that would get the attention of the younger generation. I mean, as long as there's a big respect deal here, and I think that the thing that the younger crowd wants the older guys to recognize is that while they paved the way for them, this is their game now. And I think sometimes there's this notion, fairly or unfairly, that the old generation has been slow to seed that.
Yeah.
And but I'm not saying that would be a problem. I'm just saying it's certainly an issue that, in terms of how you approach it, it could be beneficial, but you'd have to proceed with not caution so much as respect, I guess, is the best way to put it.
I'll get you out of here in just a couple more questions. I'm enjoying speaking with you. Back to what you said at the beginning of, if it was when the shot clock generation, if there was a podcast type deal, if you were sitting at a round table right now with your peers in the sports writing community, journalists, people in the NBA, what kind of discussion do you think it would be centered around this? Are people pretty like-minded in the sports writing side of things with you in regards to how to fix what's going on? I would find that to be a pretty riveting roundtable discussion.
Yeah, I think that we probably all bring different ideas of how to rectify this problem. I don't know that anybody thinks it's a good idea, because certainly, as little as a fan wants to watch, a game where 4 players are sitting out without an injury, those are even more deathly to cover. So I can assure you that for sports writers and sportscasters who have to make their living trying to write about these games, we don't want them that way either, just from a professional point of view. Like I said earlier, one of the things that this issue really fascinates me is that there's just so many different ways that you can propose change, and to make you think, and to make you just the ones that you and I have talked about in the last 25 minutes. I mean, I think that they're smart, and they may not work, and they may not ever be allowed to be implemented. But I think they're smart enough to at least consider and to at least ponder. And I think to me, that makes for a great topic. I do think that while I would rather not have, had this proliferation, cause this topic to become such a hot button issue, I think it's a worthwhile subject to discuss. And again, I think the discussion becomes smarter when you understand that there is some value to the core issue of what's going on here. That these guys, it is hard to grind it for 82 games. It is hard to play back-to-back, to play 3 out of 4, to play 5 out of 7, to do what the schedule requires them to do. And it's hard, from the owner's standpoint to even ponder thinking about reducing the schedule by 10 games or shorten the playoffs, because how do you pay for all these things? How do you make your profits? So you have to understand that there are certain realities, and you have to base your wish list within those realities. That's, I think, what makes for an especially fascinating conversation about this. Definitely.
And one more thing, I find that the best of 7, it wasn't like that, and it was. Correct me if I'm wrong. The '90s it was best of 5 first round. Let's say, take it back to the year there was a lockout and the regular season was in the 60s. If they shaved some games, and then let's say the first round of the playoffs was best of 3, second round was best of 5, and then only the conference finals and the NBA finals were best of 7. Could I make the argument that would be a more interesting product because every game would matter in the regular season that much more, and then the playoffs, which would be condensed, and I think maybe looking out for these guys in less games parlayed with the shorter regular season, you think that could make for a more interesting product ultimately?
Well, there's no question it would make it more interesting, because I just the schedule just proposed. I'm thinking about the Warriors drawing the Blazers, and the Blazers stealing Game 1 in Golden State in the first round of the playoffs, and all of a sudden, after a magnificent season, your entire season comes down to Game 2 on the road.
Exactly. I think that's phenomenal.
To me, that's pretty cool, right? But I'm also, cynical enough to realize that the owners would never go for that. Players probably wouldn't go for it either. But just because whenever you take stuff away, you're talking about reducing the bottom line, and right now Steve Kerr's the only guy on record who's volunteering to do that.
Yeah.
But man, I'll tell you what. Yeah, unfortunately, what we've had an 82-game schedule for the last 50 some odd years.
Yeah.
We've had 7-game playoff series the whole ride. For the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
It's hard to go back. If we were still building somewhere, and we started with best of 3, best of 5, best of 7, I think that would be wonderful. And a shorter regular season. I think a shorter regular season makes so much sense on so many levels. Except the only one that matters.
Money.
I mean, I think a 62-game season would or 64 or whatever. There would be no back-to-backs. There would be no 3 games in 4 days. Think about the quality of the games, and think about how much they would matter. Unfortunately, I think you and I could poetically ponder just how valuable they would be. But the only thing that matters is the fact that less games that the owners can charge for and that the players can get a percentage of, and unfortunately I think that's going to always carry the day. Yeah,
that's why we love the NFL so much. 16 games, single elimination playoffs. It's any given Sunday. You add a little element to that in the NBA. I think it's back to what you said, being able to be a little transparent. It's 2017, but again, I think unfortunately it comes down to the almighty dollar.
Yeah, I mean, I set up for your plan so quickly that that not only would head spin, but everything else would spin too. Because I think that would make for such a much better, more interesting, more fast. Just think about an NBA where every game really does matter. It's. I mean,
isn't that why we love the tournament so much? The March Madness tournament. Half people that are watching that are casual fans don't even know the names of these guys.
Right.
But we're dialed in, and it's just
not just the upsets; it's the potential for upsets.
Exactly.
That will carry over into the NBA too, which just isn't possible now. I mean, you just never have the feeling that especially when you have real separation between the seeds and the playoffs. You just never have the feeling that the 7th, the 8th seed is going to be able to beat the 1 and the 7 is going to beat the 2. I mean, it's happened in history, Selvage. It has happened. But it just doesn't seem nearly as likely as when a 15 seed has a 2 seed on the ropes in the NCAA.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I so appreciate the time. It's been a fantastic conversation. Last question, if you had Silver at a lunch right now, talking shop, would this be the number one issue you would bring up in terms of making a better league for getting ready for next season?
I would, because I mean, we keep going back to the notion of these smart opinions that make this so fascinating. He's such a smart guy. I'd love to know what are your, even if you can't implement them, what are your three favorite ideas for trying to rectify this? Even if they involve notions that as commissioner you can never have passed, what would you? If you had absolute powers, what would you do? And I'd be very curious to see what he would say about that.
Interesting. Very interesting. Well, Mike, thank you so much. It's been a true pleasure. Lead columnist for the New York Post. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Vac, VACC. Anything you want to shout out or apply article on what made it so special this year? I thought it was very, very spot on again. And I really enjoy your pieces and your point of view in sports. I think you're fantastic.
Yes, the blue blood and the new blood's coming up in the Final Four, which, I think if Carolina plays the way Carolina can play, they're not going to have too hard a time winning 2 games. But the problem with Carolina this year is they play the way they can play about 30% of the time, and that's not going to be good enough.
Nah, yeah. Hey, quick question. Looking at the projection of where sports writing and sports media is going here with the internet and everything, and do you ever ponder with any of your friends of where the this industry is going in the next 5, 10, 15 years?
Only about 15 times a day. because it is fascinating. Look, I mean, you just look at the way where the media world is now with the sports writing landscape and sports media landscape. Just compared to what it was 10 years ago when there was no Twitter, when Facebook wasn't near what it is for in terms of a professional outlet.
Yeah.
When podcasts, say, come on my podcast, and you wonder if you should consult a lawyer. Podcast, and part of life, right? And I think that's part of what I always try and urge younger, and not always younger, sometimes older people in this profession, is that I know there's always been a resistance among the so-called mainstream guys like myself, toward years ago bloggers or podcasters or and to me, I mean, what I've always said, and this isn't just for the purpose of your listeners, Alex, but it means people who do podcasts and do blogs are essential to the conversation of sports now, and to the way we do our jobs in the mainstream media, because it's bloggers. Just a blogger will go 5,000 words about his favorite Bruce Springsteen album. Why? He's not getting paid for that. He's just going 5,000 words because he's obsessed with Bruce Springsteen and Darkness on the Edge of Town. And there's an audience for that. And it's not just an audience for that, but people, I think, over time have said, well, why can't, people in the newspaper, people on these established websites, make me engaged as much as this blog does. And so what that does for guys like me is it forces us to always remember that the reason why we've gotten to where we've gotten in our professions is because we worked at it, because we were willing to not, write things from 30,000 feet every day. I mean, it involved, reaching out to people who knew answers to questions we had, and being a reporter, and to me, I mean, it's that's the beauty of what the proliferation of other types of other platforms has done for guys like me. I still work in the most old school business going in terms of being a newspaper, but it's tremendous to be exposed to everything else that's available, because it makes you it really does make you have to think sharper and work just as hard as you ever did before. And I think that's an essential element in being successful in my business. And I do find that there are fewer people who make the snide comments, about this guy just don't listen to him. He's just a blogger.
Yeah.
Or what does he know? What does he know? He just goes on this podcasting thing and spews what he thinks. No, that's not how I don't think that's the majority of what people feel anymore. I really don't. I think that's a tribute to the fact that I think that we've seen the impact. And, we always hear the negative impact that the media has, but I think overwhelmingly media in our lives has a very positive impact. And I'm not just talking about the news media. I'm talking about everything that's available to us in 2017. And I think once you appreciate that, I think it allows for a little more wiggle room for survival. I'm glad to see that, like the New York Post, while, our bread and butter, I guess, is still when, Good Morning America, holds up our front page or our back page. It's not the way we pay our bills anymore. I mean, we are a digital media operation that, I'm glad we've embraced that, because it's the only way they will survive, for 5 more minutes, let alone 5 more years or 5 more decades.
Yeah, I'm so glad I asked the question, and thank you for guys like myself that are going the non-conventional route in this industry and seeing what happens. But I just wanted to say, to your point, I love that you can deliver the news, give us the facts, and then also move the needle. I think that's the best kind of journalism. It's my favorite kind. And I don't know how often you listen to Coward. He said something that was interesting I want to throw out real quick, and then I'll let you go. He said, in today's age where we have Twitter, where, before the internet, breaking a news story that's how you potentially stuck out. But in today's age where you got 1,900 publications finding out in instant gratification time the same news, how do you separate yourself? his 2 cents was you separate yourself with strong opinions. Strong opinions will always stand out. That's why Stephen A., Skip, and the list goes on, get paid what they do. And so I just wanted to say, you know, I appreciate that you're someone in your craft that absolutely is out there and with a theory like this. And I don't know if you know this, but Coward said your theory was one of his favorites on his show. So I hope to hear you on there talking about it as well.
Well, that's great. But I can tell you, I really appreciate that strong opinion, Alex. That's very nice of you to say.
Yeah, without question. Well, Mike, thank you so much for the time. I know you're a busy man, and enjoy New York and the Final Four and everything coming up, and continued success.
Great talking, Alex. Thanks so much for the time.